Hi, I'm Mel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to continue with some of our summer delights by making a blueberry and peach crisp. We're going to start by taking a stick of slightly softened butter, and this is going to be for the topping. It's a little bit of a streusel topping, and what I'm going to do is just sort of slice it off the stick into the bowl. And this makes it a little easier to combine it with the other ingredients as we go along to make our nice little chunky clumps of our streusel topping. Sometimes if I cut it a little too big, I'll just cut it in half. It's fine. You have irregular chunks in this anyway, so it doesn't matter. I usually like doing this method versus a pastry blender because I don't have a pastry blender and I don't really need one more little doodad in my kitchen right now. So we have one big chunk on our piece of butter. So I'm just going to chop that up. It's a little slippery, I know. And scooch it in. Okay, to add to that, we're going to take half a cup of flour. And we are going to take a teaspoon and a half of cinnamon. We're going to add in half a cup of brown sugar. I like to break that up just a little bit because it needs it. And 3/4 of a cup of oats, just your standard Quaker oats, nothing too adventurous there. And we're going to take a fork and just blend together. I don't get very particular about this because it's just a streusel topping. It's flour and sugar and butter, so it's all good no matter how it looks. But what you want to do is to reduce it down to little nuggets, little chunks. And you just keep sort of digging into it with your fork. Again, if you have a pastry cutter, a pastry blender, that works too. I just don't need one more thing in my house right now. Throw that back in. Sometimes you have a little escapee, so you have to go fishing back out. And I like to do this before I do the filling of the crisp, because the crisp goes together pretty quickly, and so this is usually the most time-intensive bit of the process. Now you can also go in, like right now I'm going to go in and dig in with my hands. Don't worry, my hands are clean, I wash them a lot. And break up the bigger chunks, sort of incorporate everything together, because you don't want it to be one big mass. This is also why I let this kind of sit a little bit while we're making our filling, is just to kind of not have it be too melty, let it firm back up a little bit after handling. Okay. And just sort of check through, see that you have nice little chunky bits, that you don't have anything too floury on the bottom, because you don't want it to be too floury. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at this. It looks pretty good. You don't need to have little mini chunks unless you feel the need for mini chunks. And we'll set this aside while we get our filling ready. Now for our fruit filling, we're going to start with 5 cups of chopped up peaches. Basically, I skin them, I do them in slices, and then I cut the slices in half, so that way you sort of have bite-sized bits. And if you need to know how to skin a peach, I will link a video down there for you in the description, so that way you can see how to do it the quick and easy way. Now, you don't have to skin the peaches, it's not required. I just prefer it that way. To this, I'm going to add a cup of fresh blueberries, and maybe I'll just toss in a handful extra, but about a cup will do you. I just like a little extra blueberry in mine. To that, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar, white sugar, and then 1/3 cup of flour. This will help gel up the juices a little bit. And just 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to give this a little bit of a stir to incorporate. Mix up our peaches and berries. I know it looks a little floury, but you're going to need that flour to keep it from being a completely liquid mess at the end. So trust me on this one. You need some flour in there. Now, I'm also going to add in about a teaspoon of vanilla, maybe a little more. Who really measures vanilla? I don't know. I never do. And then for just a little extra something, and this is completely optional, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of Amaretto. So I like a little bit of almond flavor that it gives it, and it just makes it a little special. So put that in there and mix it up really well. Now for this, I'm going to be using a 10-inch cast iron skillet, and you don't need to use a cast iron skillet, it's not required. So here's a skillet, it's already been buttered up. If you're using like a pie plate or a casserole dish, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead and use that. Just make sure you either grease it or spray it with a little baking spray before you put your fruit in, because you don't want things to stick. So I'm going to go and put about half of this in here and just kind of spread it around a little bit. Put a little bit more in. I'm going to go and take a little bit of extra butter and just put a couple little slices in. It's about a tablespoon of butter. So that melts in as this all cooks. Okay. And we're going to just put the rest of this in here. Now, the thing to remember when you do this is how thick your layer is when you bake this will impact how long you really need to bake it. Now, this is a thinner layer, so I won't need to bake it quite as long, but it's up to you. So if you have a smaller casserole dish that you're using, which is going to make it be a little bit deeper, then just, keep in mind you might need to add a few minutes to the baking time. If you're using a wider, shallow dish like this, well, then you need it a little bit shorter. You're really going to go for it to be bubbly. So I'm going to add my topping, kind of breaking up any super large chunks. Make sure you get it all around. Everybody always wants a little bit of it. Just even it out. This topping is my favorite part, and really I could double this and be perfectly happy with it. But I might end up with more topping than filling, so that's always a questionable proposal. And I have a little bit of a floury bit at the bottom, but that's okay. We'll just pour that in the center. And I'm just sprinkling this around, and this is going to go into a 350-degree oven. I'm going to check it at about 35 minutes because, again, this is a little more shallow, but really anywhere from about 35 to 45 minutes should get you to where you need to be depending on your oven. So let me go pop this in and we'll come back when it's done. So here we are bubbling away at 35 minutes. It looks like it needs just a few more minutes to finish off. So I'm going to pop it back in for 3 or 4 more minutes just to get it nice and brown. Here we are, fresh out of the oven. You can see it's nicely golden brown. You can see the blueberry just sort of peeking out, but it's a little too hot to eat just yet. So I'm going to let this sit and cool for a while, and then we'll dig in. We're going to be making an amaretto whipped cream, which is a lovely dessert topping to give you a little bit of an almond flavor and a little bit of a boozy flair. I'm starting with a metal bowl that has been chilling in the freezer and a cup of very cold heavy whipping cream. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar to this. I'm going to give it a quick stir. And this is just to keep the powdered sugar from flying everywhere. We're going to need to beat this at a little bit higher in a moment. Now, depending on your preferences in life, you can do a tablespoon of amaretto or 2 tablespoons of amaretto, depending on how strong an amaretto flavor you want. I'm just going to do about a tablespoon in here, and I'm not measuring exactly. And then we're going to go ahead and mix it on high. It tends to splash a little bit here and there. I'm going to go and take a spatula and just scrape down the bowl a little bit. And this is mainly because there was a little bit of powdered sugar on the sides. And so I want to make sure that gets really good and incorporated in here. And then we'll go and turn the mixer back on. You can see it's starting to thicken up a little bit, but we want it to be thicker than this. So we're going to keep going. Pause for a second. You can see it's definitely getting stiffer here. I want it just a little bit more because it is still a little soft around the edges. And so I want to make sure we get everything about the same level of stiffness. But it's looking good so far. So here we have it, nice, thick, smooth, ready to use. So go ahead, pop this back into the refrigerator to keep it nice and cold until you're ready to use it. And here's our finished crisp topped with a nice little dollop of an amaretto whipped cream. Hope you enjoy.